Philip Sheridan terrorized the Shenandoah Valley during the Civil War, and it was his relentless pursuit of General Lee at Appomattox that ended the Civil War. But President Abraham Lincoln considered him so short he could, quote, scratch his ankles without stooping. His prowess almost gave him a shot at the presidency, but his overseas birthplace and ultimately a heart attack robbed him of the White House. A steamship was named in his honor, owned by Eber Ward, whose family had a long legacy in maritime history. The steamer Sheridan found itself in trouble in November of 1875 on its way across Lake Superior. A blinding spring snowstorm pushed them onto a sandbar at Grand Island near Munising. The crew were promised bonuses if they helped unload the Sheridan, shoveling 300 tons of wheat until the ship could finally be pulled free. They then sailed the cargo to Buffalo, where they offloaded the ship and picked up 700 barrels of salt for Detroit. Pete Whalahan was a deckhand who had signed on to the ship just 2 months prior. He told a Detroit news reporter that he and several other men asked to get off the ship, but the captain sailed instead, and within a few miles of Buffalo, the Sheridan caught fire. The majority of the crew escaped to the steamer Annie Craig, but Captain Mitchell, the cook and chief engineer, stayed back until it was realized the pumps couldn't put out the blaze. They were picked up by the steam barge Alvin Turner. The crew eventually made it to Detroit, but Captain Ward was furious over the crew's alleged mutiny on the ship, threatening Whalahan with prison time. Pete went to a bar down the street where he learned his crewmate John Harris had just been robbed of $15. A crewman on the steamer St. Joseph was caught red-handed with 3 $5 bills, and Alex Bremer was arrested. One of Bremer's crewmates found Harris at the bar and punched him, and Pete broke up the fight. Whalahan was upset over his missing bonus, so he headed up to the Detroit Evening News office on Shelby. Pete told reporter William Little that Captain Mitchell did nothing to put out the blazing Phil Sheridan, but the journalist needed a second source, asking if he knew where the rest of the crew were. The deckhand took Little to the Mansion House, but it turned out everyone had gone back to the saloon. In December of 1875, this was the corner of Wayne Street and Woodbridge, and about over here would have been where Detroit and Cleveland Steamship had a big warehouse for handling baggage. And in this corner over here was a very inexpensive place for sailors to stay. It was called the Rob Roy House. Peter Whalahan should have never gone back to the bar. John Plug Campbell was the man that had punched Harris for arresting his friend, and he immediately recognized Pete. He swore at him and punched him twice, so hard the reporter had to catch Peter from falling on the floor. Campbell had killed Whalahan with that punch. He fled out of Detroit and jumped a train to Port Huron, eventually making it to Buffalo, where police found him in a bar. He pled guilty to the crime, and the judge sent him to the new prison in Jackson. Nothing remains from the days of Plug Campbell and the Rob Roy Saloon. The busy docks went silent when commodities were moved by the cars and trucks produced in Detroit, and the empty warehouses were destroyed to make way for a new civic arena. In the 1950s, about 3 blocks were raised for parking for the Ford Auditorium. Then in 1959, they actually started building this incredible facility. This is the Coble Hall. And if you were lucky enough to see a live concert here, you know what it meant. But so many of us experience this through live albums. Hank Williams, Journey Captured, Kiss Alive, and of course, Bob Seger's Live Bullet. And if you listen very carefully, you can still hear Alto Reed's saxophone in the distance. The reporter who wrote several stories on Plug Campbell eventually went to Jackson himself, but as the city editor. Scripps started a new paper in St. Louis, and Little took the city editor job there. In an ironic twist, he himself survived an attack as well. Little had written a scathing article about a local politician's affair with a woman that wasn't his fiancée. The 22-year-old son of the politician found Little at the Evening Chronicle and hit him on the head with his cane. He pulled out a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol, but it failed to fire, and police arrived soon after. Charges of assault were later dropped. William Little later became an editor in St. Louis, but left journalism for a job as a postmaster. He became sick and moved to California, passing away in 1908.